Hey, this is Aga. Welcome. And in this video, I want to talk about 5 big mistakes to avoid when faced with a sales objection. Now, when faced with sales objections, we all have a tendency to go into defensive mode, to retreat. The first big mistake that I see a lot of sellers make when they're faced with an objection is that they assume that all is lost. And especially when it comes to money objections, which are highly sensitive and people have a lot of challenges around, this is very often the case. They assume all is lost, they assume the deal will not move forward. We automatically jump into assuming the worst. Instead, here's what I would recommend. Look at an objection as an obstacle that needs to be resolved before you can move forward with the sale. Let me say that again. Look at an objection as an obstacle, nothing more, simply an obstacle that needs to be removed before you can move forward and close the sale. It's an explicit expression by a buyer that something is missing, something is lacking for them to be able to work with you. But at the same time, they're indicating that at least at some level, they are willing, they are wanting to work with you. If you look at it that way, an objection is not so scary. So don't assume all is lost. Now, the second reaction that I sometimes see in sellers is the exact opposite. They become defensive. They start arguing with the buyer, they start building argumentation, and they start sort of a counterattack to address the objection head on. The only thing that's going to create is more resistance from the buyer. Because obviously if they brought up the objection in the first place, they at least at some level believe that it is valid, and if you become defensive, they will become defensive in turn, and you'll start entrenching your opinions. Instead, what I would recommend is ask questions, clarify to understand. Make sure that you understand the nature of the objection. Make sure that you have the right objection. A lot of objections are not what they first appear. A lot of money objections ultimately are cover-ups for an entirely different category of objection, for example. So don't become defensive. Ask questions and seek to clarify and understand. The third problem or the third challenge that I see, and this may sound counterintuitive, the third problem and the third mistake, quote unquote, that I see sellers make when faced with objections is to address them immediately. Again, people immediately start arguing. They start putting up arguments why the buyer is wrong or at least incorrect. And again, what I would recommend is clarify to understand. Make sure that you understand the objection in its entirety before you attempt even to answer it. The fourth mistake that I see is to automatically assume that when you've answered it, you've now dealt with it. Very often this is not the case. Buyers want to be polite, they want to be kind, they want to be nice to other people. And so even if you've not addressed an objection completely, just to let you off the hook, they will often say, yeah, that's fine, let's move forward. You can see it in their eyes though. You can see they're not convinced. You can see the objection is still there at some level. And the worst thing you could do at this point is to assume that you've dealt with it and move forward. Instead, confirm that you've dealt with it. Ask, listen, is there anything about what we discussed that's not comfortable, that just doesn't sit right? Is there anything left? And if they say no, then you can move on. And then the final problem or challenge or mistake that I see when dealing with buyer objections is dwelling upon it. A lot of times, even after they've resolved the objection to the buyer's satisfaction, or there's an action plan in place to do so, a lot of buyers keep dwelling on it. They keep returning to it. They keep talking about it. So if we're going to do this, are you saying that that will resolve the problem? Yes. Okay. So, just so we're sure, I'm going to do this. Don't do that. Once you've addressed the objection, don't dwell on it. Move forward. Continue in the sales process. Continue with the conversation. So 5 big mistakes that I see sellers make when faced with a buyer sales objection. Number 1, to assume that all is lost. Don't do that. Look at an objection merely as an obstacle on your path to success. Number 2, to become defensive. Instead, explore to understand and get a deeper understanding of the buyer's objection, the reason for bringing up that objection. Number 3, to address it immediately. Don't jump the gun, take some time. Take the time to clarify, to understand, to float potential scenarios and options for resolution. Number 4, to assume you've dealt with it and not confirm that you have. Always confirm whether or not your resolution process or your scenario or your idea will in fact address the objection for the buyer to their full satisfaction. And number 5, dwelling upon it. Don't dwell upon it. When you've dealt with it, move on, move forward. As always, if you like tangible, practical sales tips and strategies like this one, things that you can put into place right now, tomorrow at your next sales meeting or call, sign up for my YouTube channel. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then.